We'll be in Deuteronomy, Proverbs, Timothy, but one thing that we don't want to have in our beliefs is the very obvious inconsistency. Now we're flesh, we're human. You're going to be an inconsistent teenager, adult, parent, but I work at it. I remember going to Bible college my first semester at Howes Anderson. It was my third year of college. Kept trying to find a college that would let me graduate. But one of our friends, in fact, it was one of my wife's bus calling partners, soul winning partners. She said at their church, they had the girls wear modest length skirts, but they had no problem with the girls wearing swimming suits with the guys at swimming activities. So is there any inconsistency there? So what that would be called is appropriate. They feel like, and I'm putting words in their mouth because no one's told me this, but the only way I can justify that is at the beach or the pool, this kind of dress is appropriate. But at school or church, this kind of dress is appropriate. And if that's where people want to draw their lines, that's fine. But there's no Bible in that. And so these 40 years and more since we've been here, my goal has been, especially for teenagers, because you're coming up in the world, and you that are watching this is a high school, junior and senior class I'm just recording. But you're growing up in a world where you are a natural, not a critic, but a natural doubter. That's why the communists and Muslims and cultists, they love the college campus, because suddenly you're out from underneath your parents' leadership, and even if you're not in church, you're on your own. You're in a dorm, and it's let me have my own opinions and all, and so you're willing to question everything. I don't mind you questioning. This book is so true. Go ahead and question it. It's not a problem. If you say, I just don't know if I believe the creation story, great, let's question it. I don't believe whatever it is theologically, or I think the earth is flat. You might get to the right college and find flat earthers. Let's examine it. It's not that hard to figure out. And so I don't want you to be intimidated by someone bringing up questions. Now, there is another, so I talk about one idea is appropriate. Here is appropriate, like at a wedding, it's appropriate for a girl to have a backless, shoulderless, low-cut dress. That's what people would say is appropriate. But not at church. Well, that's okay for an opinion. If you want to base your behavior on opinions, that's fine. But if you want to base it on the Bible, then it's unless the Bible says do this here and do that there, then that's fine. But I want so much for you to have Bible reasons for what you believe. And then again, one more thing before we look at the scripture. In 1 Corinthians, it talks about long hair on a man. Does not even nature itself teach that if a man have long hair, it's a shame to him. All right, well, if it's a shame, you shouldn't do it, right? We're all in agreement with that? But the very next verse says, nevertheless, if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither in the churches of God. So Paul said, this is obvious, this is logical, but don't get in a fight with somebody about it. And so that's why you'll rarely hear me talk about convictions from the pulpit during this time of the year, right before young people are at college, or maybe young people home from college, holidays. I may talk a little bit more about things, because I want our young people that are gone to remember there's a reason we believe what we believe. And that's important to me. So let's look three simple passages, and then maybe tomorrow another lesson we'll pick up. But Deuteronomy 22, Moses is going through a long list of do's and don'ts. And someone might say, well, how do you know? Because this is talking about dress, obviously. And someone might say, well, how do we know what they wore in Moses' day? And so point number one, if you're taking notes, point number one is masculine, feminine. Mine's got a masculine / feminine. Your dress should be the opposite of the opposite gender. And I'm going to read the verse in case you don't have it. Let's see if I can get my glasses on here. The woman, I'm in Deuteronomy 22:5. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth. That word pertains, really important. That pertaineth to a man, Neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. Pertain. You have a Lakers jersey on, and that's obviously a Lakers jersey. You have something that's the right colors, but maybe not exactly right. Well, that leans that way. It pertains to that. It's similar. You have your hair painted the right purple and gold or whatever. Someone's church, all their chairs and their auditorium, they're renting the building, and it's all Laker colors, the church auditorium. It's great. But anyway, so point number one, we're not talking about the Scottish wearing kilts or what's culturally appropriate. God makes, this book is an eternal book. God says, if it pertains to a woman, guys shouldn't wear it. If it pertains to a man, girls shouldn't wear it. Simple as that. Does it lean that direction? Does it imply? The word pertain is the key there. And so, you might say, I just knocking on doors. I met a couple just moved here from India, and the guy, and again, we don't get our dress standards from what society does. You know, society's stupid, right? We all understand that. We all think some ancient battle warrior guy, he's a knight. Of course, to be a good knight, you have to have a long flowing ponytail or something. Or if you're going to be, what are the people on Lord of the Rings that have long hair, whoever they are? The elves or whatever, the orcs. We don't get our dress standard from Hollywood. Whatever a society might do, that's irrelevant. It's what God says. Someone might say, well, talking about long hair in a guy, what about the people in England? And what about the founders in America that had wigs and whatever? I don't get my dress standard from George Washington. I get my dress standard from here. And, people can argue. Well, you can argue all you want. All we want to do is establish some principles. So principle number one, does it pertain to women or does it pertain to men? Does it lean that direction? And it's not just a suggestion. What does God say in verse 5? All that do so are a what? An abomination. That's kind of a big word. All that do so are an abomination. It's a big deal to God. It's an abominable thing. Like the big snowy guy on the old-fashioned Christmas story, all right? It's abomination. So, number one, does it pertain to a man? Does it pertain to a woman? Back to the guy I met knocking on doors. Family moved from India, a man and his wife, and then the cousin lives there with him. They've got a little 1-year-old. And the guy wore I'm going to say, almost knee-length something, like a long shirt, slit on the side, and then he had pants on underneath it. Well, that's their style. But I'm not worried about style. I'm worried about, does it pertain to a man or does it pertain to a woman? Simple as that. All right. Number one, is it feminine or masculine in whatever culture you're in? Now, how about this? One more thought before I go there. Let's just take American culture. The bathroom doors, people get all offended when you talk about it, but still, except those that are half and half, and we know those got issues. A bathroom door's got a skirt dress sort of thing on the ladies' room, and a pants sort of thing on the men's room, and some might have some different ideas, but Mrs. Reynolds, Pastor Reynolds' wife, she taught at a ladies' conference a couple of years ago, and she said, my husband, he is so narrow-minded. He won't wear a dress even if it's a masculine cut. If he gets it off the sale rack, he won't wear a dress. He won't even wear a skirt at home when it's just the family because he just won't do it. She went through this whole big old long thing about why her husband won't wear skirts and dresses, being the opposite of a lady wearing pants. You might think that's so funny. Why does she talk about her husband wearing a skirt? No different than a lady wearing a pair of pants. So where would you wear that pants? Well, where would your brother wear a skirt? Nowhere. But it really doesn't matter. The location is not the issue. The issue is the principle, right? Number one is what? Masculine and, all right, masculine and feminine. Is there a difference? All right, look over to Proverbs 7. Proverbs chapter 7. And Solomon is teaching his young son. We're thinking a teenager. We don't know for sure. But talking to the son. Proverbs chapter 7. And he warns his son over and over about the lips of a woman and the eyes of a lady and the forward woman. And of course, there's warnings about the forward man as well. But in Proverbs 7, Solomon says in verse 6, at the window of my house, I look through my casement. He's looking out the window and he sees, there's the street, there's the city, people wandering around. And he said he sees this young man, a simple young man. Verse 8, passing through the street near her corner. There's a certain lady. Back in verse 5, he describes her as a strange woman. And he goes down to verse 10. And behold, there met him a woman with the what? Attire of a harlot. All right. So we said number 1 in Deuteronomy, in regard to our clothing, it should not pertain to the opposite gender. It should be masculine or feminine. It should not pertain to the opposite. Now he says there's a lady with the attire of a harlot. We call this book what? Whose word? God's word. All right. So we've got God telling Solomon to write, that lady has the attire or the clothing of a harlot. So we can say without any question that in that culture, now what a harlot wore in whatever 800 BC, what did they wear? I have no clue what they wore. But a girl who wanted to present herself as available, a girl who wanted to present herself as for sale, she would dress in a certain manner. And some might say, well, in those days you used a veil or no veil or whatever. It's just irrelevant. When a girl makes herself appear available or for sale, God says that's the attire of a harlot. Now, this gal could have been a Sunday school teacher, right? You're thinking, no. Couldn't she? Couldn't she be a Bible reading, praying pastor's wife? Because right now, all we know about her is what she put on her body. And someone says, man looks on the outward appearance and God looks on the heart. Yes, but God is obviously looking on the outward appearance right here. He's the one who said she's dressed like a harlot. So just because she looks this way doesn't mean she is. And I remember many times over the years, some girl, a teenage girl, you bus workers have probably seen this, some girl, she gets saved, starts riding the bus, and she just really wants to be on the team. And I remember a girl, younger, junior high maybe, early high school girl coming up. She was so excited. She got her first dress, and she comes walking up to me, and she got a dress that it is so short. It was really, really short. Like her fingers were way past her hemline. And she says, Pastor, look, I got a dress. And I said, well, that's really good. What do you say? She's doing the very best she knows how, right? So we're not talking about people being bad. Now, this woman is a bad woman. We know the rest of the proverb. But God isn't talking about her heart. God's talking about her appearance. God's talking about her availability, how she appears. And all you guys know, what a guy sees puts an idea in his head. And if a gal dresses in a certain fashion, it puts ideas in their head. So, number 1 principle, you should not lean toward feminine. If you're a male, you should not lean or pertain toward masculine. If you're a girl, simple as that. It's not cultural. It's not at the beach or the church or the wedding. Just simple as that. Number 2, that she shouldn't have things that make her appear for sale or available. A girl should not make herself appear. A guy shouldn't look at a girl and think that girl's available. And I would suggest that as a parent, you teach your kids and you girls, adult ladies, I think before you leave the house, you ought to stand in front of a full-length mirror and look. I do it. Of course, that's because I'm old. I don't want my tie crooked and my shirt unbuttoned or my buttons buttoned crooked, but I've got a full-length mirror in my office, and when I walk out, I stop and look and think if I look stupid. I can't help being old, but I can at least help not being ridiculous. So the second principle from Proverbs 7 and verse 10 is looking available, making you look cheap, making you look available, okay? Now look over to 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 2. And this is something that is very, it's not, this principle, pastors do not like talking about this kind of a thing. But to me, some of you, maybe many of you, are going to go to a Bible college and you're going to have dress standards. And you're going to stand in that school and have these standards of what you should and shouldn't do. I've got a picture of my wife and I on a hill, the backside of the campus at Howells Anderson College, and it was snowing, or it had been snowing, and we got a sled. We're going to slide down the hill, not together because we were in Bible college, but we're out there just looking for a break. I still had a tie on. We had a few minutes between class or whatever. She had a dress on, but so do our standards change when we're in the snow or wherever else? Now, I had a tie on simply because we just ran out and ran back. But do you know anything scriptural about a tie? Then let's get rid of them. Why? No man invented this, because no man would do something that choked his fellow man day after day. But anyway, it is our culture. A friend of mine's a pastor in Hawaii for many years, and years ago when he went there, he said, "Brother Bruce, what do we do?" He and I were on a bus route in Chicago together. He said, "What do you think?" He said, "What about?" He said, "Hardly anybody in Hawaii wears a tie." I said, "Praise God." There's nothing fundamental about a tie. This is me. I feel like my appearance, I am a professional. I walk in the highest calling that there is career-wise in America. And when I see presidents never wearing a tie, and bank presidents not wearing a tie, and CEOs, then I may change some things. But I've Googled top CEOs, top political leaders, not musicians and athletes, because I don't think I'm modeling them. But you know what? They almost never have facial hair. That's just a reality. But it's not a conviction, because Jesus had a beard, all right? But that is very cultural. And they wear ties. And obviously they don't always wear ties. So it's not a right or wrong. So I told him, I said, what's the Senate? What's the mayor or the governor of Hawaii? What do they wear? He said they wear nice Dockers and he called them island shirts. And I said, hire me. I want to come work for you. Because that's professional dress. That's not biblical. And to me, that's just a standard that I have because of who I am and who I represent. And in our culture in Southern California, I don't want to appear to be a contemporary church pastor, because I'm not. So when I go out soul winning, I wear a tie. And there's occasions when I'm out and I may be doing something different, but as a general rule, because I am a fundamental independent Baptist. I don't want to associate, not against the other churches, but I'm not them. But that's not conviction. That's simply, otherwise you guys would all have to have ties on. That is a matter of appropriate within our culture. All right, 1 Timothy chapter 2, and again, very unpopular teaching. Paul is writing to the young preacher and says, Timothy, here's how I want you to pastor these churches. Here's how I want you to do it. You've heard me teach on this before, but I'm going to go through it slow because you need some notes. So in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1, I exhort therefore that, what? What's the next three words? First of all, Timothy, you're teaching these people about churches. You've had all these converts. Now you're establishing churches. First of all, for 8 verses now, Paul talks to Timothy about men and prayer. He said, you've got to get the men to be men of prayer. And so 1 Timothy 2, the first thing Timothy needs to teach the men is about prayer. And then look at verse 9. In like manner. In like manner what? Well, let's go back to verse 8. I will therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. And I think the without wrath and doubting is in like manner, the next verse. I think what he's about to say in verse 9 has to do with what he said about men's prayer in verses 1 through 8. I want the men to pray holy, and I want them to do it without wrath and doubting. Men ought to be men of prayer. And he says, in like manner also that women adorn themselves, and what are your next 2 words? Adorn themselves in what? Modest apparel. Now, he doesn't give a how many inches hemline. He doesn't give a how tight is tight. and how loose is loose. He just very simply says modest. Now, there's a group of people, many people, who would rather not talk about women's dress because you talk about unpopular. Touch a man's beard and a woman's dress. That people would, as a preacher, people will be very unhappy with you. But so they will say this, the word modest means not expensive. They'll say you shouldn't be in very expensive clothing. Be common, be simple. So how much does a normal pair of jeans that you're going to go down to, I don't mean Walmart, but nice clothes. If a young person is going to wear a pair of jeans that's been properly torn and shredded in the knees, you have no idea what they cost, right? I mean, are they $10? 100? 50? All right, more? I don't know. I have no idea. But so, would a person who says the word modest means not expensive, would they not wear anything expensive? Ask yourself, is there anything you or your friends or people you look up to have that's visible that it kind of brings a little glory if it's a really expensive? How about tennis shoes?
No.
Would anyone spend a lot of money on tennis shoes? Yeah, they would, wouldn't they? Like hundreds of dollars, right? I'm not going to call any names, but there are people who would spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I remember when I went to college, Converse All-Stars they're throwbacks now in the stores, but high top Converse All-Stars, what we wore in basketball. And I went to college, and for the first time they had padded, upholstered type shoes, and the coach handed me a brand new pair of shoes that cost $36. That was like off the chart. I'd never owned anything that cost $36 but my car. This is 100 years ago, okay? Give me a break. But today, to spend $100 on a pair of tennis shoes is not uncommon. To spend multiple hundreds. So now watch. The person who says a woman ought to adorn herself in modest apparel, and if they say modest means not expensive, would they preach against expensive tennis shoes? No. Right? They wouldn't do it. Is there anything else in the casual world? Watches, phones. How about makeup? Is there anything girls or guys spend money on that's very expensive? I don't mean you. You're Christian school kids. You're weird. I mean out in the world, the typical public school or college age, what do people spend a lot of money on?
Chains.
Chains?
Yeah.
All right, good, chains. So are these preachers who say the word modest? I'm not picking on people. I'm trying to establish what the Bible says. I want you to have an answer. So if someone says that word modest doesn't mean dresses, it means not expensive, then you can point at their chain and say how much you spend on that chain. How much they spend on a chain. You don't know? I'm not anti-chain because I don't think that word means modest, cheap. I've got a couple of really nice watches people have given me, and I just don't wear watches. I don't like things. I've given away very expensive watches. I don't know. You wanted one? Yeah. Where were you? Right? I was giving away. I had that Movado someone gave me that. It's a black screen with a diamond on the 12, and he asked me, do you know what a Movado is? I said, no, I'm thinking a car. And he handed me this box. He says, well, you own one now. And I wore it for a while because he was so kind, but I gave it away to somebody. It's just, I don't wear watches. Somebody gave me a pen. You'd know the brand of the pen. I can't think what it is, but it was like a $300 ballpoint pen. I think my pens typically come from hotels. Let's see. That one's from the youth department. Yeah, this one says Embassy Suites. And you know what it does? It writes. That's what my pens aren't here to impress you because you've seen my handwriting. My pens are here to write. And but anyway, someone gave me this really expensive pen from I don't know, whatever. And someone was here, and a guest preacher, and I don't know what we were doing, and I pulled that out, and he said, is that a whatever? I said, yeah. He said, that's a really expensive pen. I said, you want it? He said, yeah, I'll take it. So I gave it away. And then someone else gave me that exact same pen. And somebody that been wherever. And so I kept it. Now that I found, I didn't know how expensive it was till I gave it away. And I thought, what was I thinking? And I gave it away. But I got another one. So I didn't give that one away. I used it. And the ink ran out real fast. So I went looking for a refill. And none of the stores had the right refill. Of course, we're in Riverside County. Well, expensive stores are here. I should have gone to Orange County or somewhere. So I went online, and I'm trying to get that refill, and then this thing popped up. If your refill looks like this, you got a knockoff. That's a piece of junk. So I got the knockoff. Anyway, they probably got them $1 a dozen or something in China. I don't know. But so you know what I mean. There are things. What else do people spend a lot of money on? Shoes, chains. What else are people out in the world? Bags. Oh, Coach? That kind of bag, or you mean like backpack bags? Okay. Gucci? Yahtzee? Was it Yahtzee, the little green guy? So we all know the beautiful brand new red Tesla that pulls into the parking lot, into the Spanish department, the poor Spanish people. And Mrs. Tamayo's car. Do we preach against expensive cars? Hey, the person who says this modest apparel means don't be extravagant, do they preach against Ferraris? No way. They don't believe that word means expensive, or they would preach on expensive things. Right? See, I want you to have an answer. When you get out in the world and someone challenges you, you need to know what you believe and why you believe it. So there's no way that word modest means expensive. Some will say the word modest means real fancy and drawing a lot of attention to yourself. Is there anyone out in the world who dresses to draw attention to themselves? Like everybody. They go on Facebook, or not Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and they're taking pictures of themselves doing all kinds of stupid things. Why? To draw attention to themselves. There are people who put things online. I think, I wouldn't post myself being that stupid. I'm not saying I've not done stupid things. I'm not going to tell the world I'm that stupid. So this word modest, there's no way. People spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a haircut. How about glasses? You just get your glasses at Walmart, right? Yeah, you probably do. But the world, they like their expensive glasses. They like their expensive hats, their expensive clothing. So you're in college, you get a job, and you girls get a job somewhere. One of our girls years ago, she didn't grow up, no family, just grew up riding our bus, coming to church, and didn't leave, stayed here. She got a job at just a fast food place as an older teenager, Jack in the Box or whatever. And they had said they were okay with some things, her dress, going to church on Sunday. And because they needed help, she worked there for a while, and then they said, we really need you to, and they were going to challenge one of her convictions. And she said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. She called me and said, what do I do? I said, decide whether you have a conviction or not. It's your call, not mine. I can't tell you how to live. And she said, well, I really feel strongly about it. I said, then tell them you won't. I said, they're not going to fire you. And they fired her. Well, we could have got an attorney and sued him, but we don't do that because God-fearing people trust God. They don't do that. But anyhow, so she called me up. Yeah, they told me to leave. I said, it'll be all right. Don't worry about it. I think it was the same day or the next day they called her back. Said, all right, we changed her mind. Because she worked hard. And she showed up. And she did her job. And they bowed to her convictions. But had she given up her convictions, she'd have had to follow their ideas. And so I want you to know what you believe. And I'm not going to tell you. You've got to make some decisions. So, number one, it should be male or female, right? Shouldn't pertain to the opposite gender. Secondly, a girl, and that's boys or girls, then, and there, I'll tell you guys, there's some clothing guys are wearing I'm concerned about. And I'm not going to talk about it because there's some things guys are really concerned about. When I grew up, there was a phrase you'd hear, like eating food you don't like. The dad would say, yeah, eat that, it'll put some hair on your chest. And now we got guys waxing their bodies, and there's something sick about a guy who wants to be smooth and pretty. Shouldn't want to be beefy and masculine. Something. When you're more concerned about how a guy looks at you, and tell you what, but see, look, that's where our culture's going. Our culture's trying to blur the genders. You see that? So you guys be very masculine, and you girls be very feminine, and don't even wear things or do things that pertain to the opposite. Then, not the attire of a harlot. You shouldn't look for sale. And there's a lot of things you could put in that. But thirdly, he says a woman should adorn herself in verse 9. Like manner also, so in like manner, without wrath and doubting, the woman ought to adorn herself in modest apparel. Now he goes on. Look at the rest of this. With shamefacedness and sobriety. Not with broided hair or gold or pearls or costly array. And that's where people get that it's this fancy outward thing. But don't girls do that at a wedding? Don't they do it at formal affairs? Sure they do. So the person who says this is talking about very fancy outward, they're liars. They'll do that at a fancy event. And I'm not against a girl or a guy dressing up extra at a wedding or something very special. I'm not against that at all. Because I don't believe that's what that's talking about. So her adorning, in verse 9, that women adorn themselves. A woman, go down to verse 10. But what should a woman's adorning be? But which becometh women professing godliness. The word adorn is to beautify. You adorn the Christmas tree with Christmas ornaments. The thing that makes you attractive should not be the outward. It should be, verse 10, it should be what women professing godliness would be. What does a godly woman have that draws you to her? What is the beauty in that girl? And it's the inward woman, not the outward. And we should look appropriate. We should look nice and all that. I'm for, makeup and curling hair, whatever it might be on a girl. But that shouldn't be the main thing. Because a girl that looks good outwardly, but has nothing right inward, that's going to be a big problem. It's the last thing you want. And so adorning. Modest apparel, let me just take a moment and mention modest apparel. We may finish this up in another lesson, but modest apparel. A girl should be able to look at her clothing and be modest. Modest, I would define modest as something that basically doesn't, it's not a showy thing. You guys have seen this, and there's errors in girls' makeup where you see a girl from a mile away and all you see is eyes. Or you see a girl with a bare midriff. And you know what? You couldn't tell if she's a blonde or a brunette. You just see belly. Sometimes way more than you want to. Someone says they look like a muffin. And then if they're at a gym, then they look like a glazed muffin. It's terrible. A girl, how about this? A girl with something very low cut. A guy doesn't notice her countenance. He notices the low-cut blouse. Or a very, very tight skirt. He doesn't notice that she's, got a pretty face or pretty hair. He notices the skirt. And so I take that word, a woman should adorn herself in modest apparel. She should cloak her beauty that no one thing stands out. To me, a truly beautiful woman is when I look at it and say, that is a pretty lady, and I turn around and I can't think of why she's pretty. Because everything is so balanced. Everything about her is attractive. Her spirit as well as her appearance. And that's that. The word modest is not bold and forward. If a girl's got there's eras you girls know, maybe you're not old enough, but there's times when it's all about lips. Black lipstick, dark red lipstick. And you look at a person, you don't notice their eyes because that was last decade. Now you notice lips. And we better stop.